All right, Logan, here we go, buddy. I'm going to do, as requested, the principles of flight. So I've got a lesson plan here that I would go through right when we get started, and we talk about what our goals are, what the different subjects are that we're going to cover. But I won't waste your time with that right today, but just know that I have it, and we'll jump right into it. So it's interesting the way an airplane flies, right? And I tell a pretty cool story about why airplanes fly, and maybe about Orville or Wilbur Wright. That the plane was invented in 1908, or say something cool like that. But anyway, we'll jump right into it for you. I want to make sure I know the knowledge and can show that to you. But the biggest factor with regards to flight was a thing called Bernoulli's principle. So he talks about it right up here with the slide. You can't really see the slide, but basically what Bernoulli's principle talks about is that the principle states that speed of a fluid increases, as the fluid increases, the pressure decreases, and vice versa. So that's super important, right? So as speed increases, the pressure decreases. And it makes sense if you think about it, although it was an amazing discovery. It spreads the molecules out, right? So it's cruising along fast, it's spread out, and then on the bottom of the wing, you've got what's on the bottom wing, you've got high pressure because it's slower, right? So the camber of the wing creates a scenario where the air is going much quicker over the top of the wing because it's got to go further to travel the same distance because you cannot compress air, right? So it's an incredible principle. One of the things I'll do when I'm there is I'll have two balloons, and I'll just tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to get two balloons, and we're going to put them on a string, and they're going to be standing up about this far apart. And then you get a hair dryer, and you blow that air through the middle of those balloons, right? And you would think that it would just blow them away, right? That's what you would think. But really what it does is it pulls them together. So it proves Bernoulli's principle. So in essence, you can almost say that the plane is getting sucked up into the sky. Would be a good way to remember about Bernoulli's principle. So it's an incredible discovery that changed the fate of the world, really. So Bernoulli was not around by the time the Wrights figured it out and used it to learn how to fly. But it's really something. And then the other thing is, of course, you can relate it to you can relate it to weather as well, high pressure systems and low pressure systems. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. So anyway, very, very exciting. Obviously, high pressure systems are a little bit easier to fly in, and low pressure systems are a lot of movement of air. So it's pulling stuff up. So anyway, pretty cool. That's the that is one of the main factors of why an airplane flies. And then we got the other smart guy, Isaac Newton, who he's got his 3 laws of physics that a lot of people know about, right? And so what he talked about was, the first law is a body of rest tends to remain in rest, a body of motion tends to stay in motion. So it's all about, he's talking here about why things move. Second law is mass times acceleration equals force, right? And then the third one is the one that really comes into play for every action is an equal and opposite reaction. So what he's talking about here is that as the airplane is flying, and I'll have an airplane, the wings are slanted up. So you've got a force coming on the bottom of the wing that's pushing it up as well, right? And then you've got thrust, right? So you've got thrust with either a jet engine or a propeller that's pulling it forward, right? So that's creating this air pushing on the bottom of the wing that's pushing it up as well. So those two factors are why an airplane flies. Very, very fascinating, interesting stuff, right? So particularly Bernoulli's principle, that was really fun to learn about that. So the other thing which we didn't talk about is we'll back up a little bit, is you've got, when an airplane flies, you've got 4 forces working against it, right? You've got the lift, you've got the weight, you've got the thrust, and the drag. So the lift obviously is the upward force. It's created by the effect of the airflow passing over and under the wing, right? That's the part that's pulling up, and that's opposed by the weight, right? That's opposed by the, how much the pilot weighs, how much the airplane weighs, all the different, the luggage in there, everything pulling it down, lift and weight are directly opposed to each other on top and bottom. And then you've got thrust, which is the propeller or the jet engine pulling it forward. And then you've got drag, which is on the back, is pulling it backwards, right? And the drag, we'll talk about drag here in a minute, but drag is holding it back. And so in level and straight flight, those forces are equal. Not the four forces are equal, but lift and weight are equal, and then thrust and drag are equal. And you've got unaccelerated flight. You've got flight, but you're staying at the same speed. So that's when all three of those or all four of those are equal. All right, so now we're going to talk about airfoils. So this is what creates Bernoulli's principle. You've got the camber of the airfoil, right? And so what happens is it provides an aerodynamic force when it interacts with a moving stream of air. So the wing shape is designed to take advantage of both Newton's law and Bernoulli's principle. The greater the curvature of the upper portion of the wing causes the acceleration of the air. So it goes faster and faster, right? So it's on the wing and it's going faster and faster, and so it's a lower pressure, right? And then you get the higher pressure underneath because it's slower, right? So a backward flow of air also is generated from the loop from the top of the surface of the ring. The reaction of this is a downwash and results in an upward force on the wing. Newton's third law. So we talked about that, where it's getting pushed up, right? And it's also apparent as the airstream strikes the bottom of the wing. That's what we're talking about. The air is forced downward, therefore causing an upward force, resulting in a positive lift. So yeah, pretty cool stuff. That's what an airfoil does, right? That's why it's designed that specific way, right? If you didn't have a camber on the wing, you'd only be using Newton's law. It's kind of like with a paper airplane, right? There's not a lot going on there. It'll go, if you throw it hard enough, it'll stay up, but not very long. So that's how an airplane flies. And you want to use the Pilot's Aeronautical Handbook. Chapter 5 goes into great detail about this. Pretty exciting. So now we're going to really get into it, right? So we're going to get into the lift-drag ratio. This is pretty heavy-duty stuff, but when you really get it, it's pretty exciting. You understand why an airplane flies and all the forces working against it, right? So you've got the LD, right? The LD line, which is this green line right here. You see that? And the LD line is walk over here. It's a lift-drag ratio, right? So it's generated. It's right here. It's generated by a wing relative to its drag. It gives you the airfoil efficiency. So how well is the lift now? And the lift-drag max is 6 degrees, right? So lift-drag max is right here at the top of the green arc. I don't know if you can see this, but it's at the top of the green arc, right? And so that's when that would be considered VX, right? I mean, you would be climbing very well right there, and I mean very efficiently. Excuse me, that would be VY, right? So you'd be climbing very efficiently right there because you have the least amount of drag, right? And then you get into the coefficient of lift, right? So the coefficient of lift, it comes right along here, and it's coming up, and we're going up the whole way, right? You're going up the whole way. And then you get right about here, which is about 20% on most planes, and this is when you stall out, right? So you're cruising along, you're going higher and higher and higher, bigger angle of attack, and then the air separates from the at 20%. It separates from the airfoil because remember it's going over. Well, if you get too much of a lift, all of a sudden over 20% with most airfoils, all of a sudden the air is no longer sticking on the wing, and basically you're just going to start falling out of the sky. Of course, the planes are designed to put the nose forward, and you'll be able to lower the lift. So anyway, so that's the coefficient of lift. And then you've got the coefficient of drag as well. At a low angle of attack, drag is minimized. At a high angle of attack, the drag is much more exaggerated. So at a higher angle of attack, you've got a much greater drag. And think about it, because the air is, you've got the plane sticking straight up in the air, right? So you got a lot more stuff. You got the wing hitting the wind, and so you're gonna have a lot more of a drag. So this is a great graph that you really need to understand, because this will help you understand why the airplane flies, right? And then of course, you've got the two stall areas right here, the 20%, and that's where they're gonna stall. And obviously we'll talk about this in another video, but just always remember that an airplane will stall at the same angle of attack, regardless of weight. So it's always right here about this 20%, and you can see that with stall here and stall here. So anyway, pretty cool stuff. So let's talk a little bit about drag, right? So drag is what sounds just like it sounds, right? It's what stops the airplane from flying, right? You've got all this force going forward, and you've got something holding it back, right? It's like sticking your hand out the window. It's going to slow down. Car's pretty powerful, but you'll slow down theoretically, right? So what is stopping us from flying quickly, right? And then another way to look at it is look at like the jet airplanes, look at like the military airplanes. They're very sleek. They have very little drag. They're meant to just go super fast. They're just like one big engine with a little cockpit, and super fast jets are that way. So yeah, it's pretty awesome. In fact, the Concorde, I don't know if you ever saw the Concorde, but that was a tiny little jet, and it could get to I think it could get to Europe in like 3-4 hours from America, and I think it had one seat on each side of the row, and that was it. Sleek, trying to minimize drag and maximize speed. So what are the different kinds of drag, right? So you've got parasitic drag. And what parasitic drag you want to think about is just think about parasites on you, right? So it increases. It's like the different things on an airplane, right? So parasitic drag can be the friction of the wings. It can be shape of the aircraft, the wing struts. All this stuff is parasitic drag. All this stuff is stuff that's just stopping it from moving forward, right? It's the struts, it's the wheels, it's the skin on the airplane. So anything that's kind of stopping it, that's stuck there, it's not going anywhere. Parasitic drag. The way you want to remember that, by the way, is that just imagine you got parasites on you, you can't get rid of it. You have to have these parasites, and that's what parasitic drag is. It's the stuff that's on the airplane that you can't get rid of. But then there's a thing called induced drag, and that's what's caused by the pilot. Now, it's not saying that you can stop it, but you do cause it. It's a necessity that you cause. And so wingtip vortices are an induced drag, right? Wingtip vortices are the airflow over the wings at the end, where it's coming down and pushing down on the airplane, right? So that's a wingtip vortices. That's a discussion for another chapter, but that's wingtip vortices, right? So all that, angle of attack is going to be a induced drag that you create. The pilot creates the drag. So it's inherent in the airfoil whenever it's producing lift. It always is present in lift. So that's the thing about flying. There's always it's not just one thing, right? So one good thing, you also got a bad thing. You're turning the airplane, you've got yaw, right? So all these different things kind of plus minus, and that's why you got to really pay close attention with flying and fully understand it. But this wingtip vortices, which is pretty interesting, this is a big problem, right? And what it is, it's the circular motion of the wing, of the airflow over the wing, and it actually hits the top of the wing, the back, the edge of the wing, and it creates it hurts flight, right? It really hurts the efficiency of the flight, right? Because it's kind of circling around, as you see right here, and it's hitting the top, so it's pushing it down. And what's interesting about it is that that's why you have winglets, right? Winglets, if you've seen winglets, they come straight off the edge of the wing, and that apparently increases the efficiency of the airplane by about 15% because it eliminates or reduces wingtip vortices. So anyway, pretty cool stuff. So the greater the angle of attack equals the greater the vortex, right? And so the vortex being the vortices, right? So because the angle of attack increases so much, the pressure difference between the top and bottom of the wing increases, right? So you increase the angle of attack, you've got a greater pressure difference. So that means the greater the vortices, right? So think about it. You've got faster air, you've got greater pressure, you're going to create harder and harder vortices. So the rush of air travels downward from the underside of the wing as it rotates around the tip. This downward movement of air is called downwash. It is the strongest right at the wingtip and decreases in intensity as you move along the span of the wing route. So it's the strongest at the edge of the wing. As you get closer to the airplane, it's not quite as strong. It's important because the lift is always produced perpendicular to the relative wind, right? So it's perpendicular to relative wind. Now the relative wind is inclined. The lift does not point straight up and is in fact being generated at an angle. So you're going up, it's being generated at an angle as you climb. So you've got less efficiency of the lift, right? This means that the only part of the lift is now acting vertically, and some of it is being wasted and acting as backwash in the horizontal direction. This horizontal compound of a lift is called induced drag. We talked about that. We induced it, right? We're the ones that created it. So anyway, enough about that. We'll move on. But anyway, chapter 4 of the Airplane Flying Handbook. That's really what you want to be looking at. And then you've got this is an interesting one. We're kind of back at this, but it just talks about where you want to be at, where the command of the airplane is, right? In normal command, you're up around here, right? So I don't know if you can see this, but basically, this is the drag, right? The drag is up here and it's kind of normal. But as you slow down, the drag decreases, and they say you get on the reverse command. So as airspeed decreases below the lift drag ratio, total drag increases. So as you decrease it, then the drag has more of an impact, and you kind of get what they call a reverse command. So this is kind of fun when we're flying an airplane. If you get real slow, the way you just have to fly the airplane differently, right? So all this stuff is designed to teach you how to fly the airplane and why you're flying it that way. So when you get on the back side of the power curve, the way you're going super slow, you've got max drag, and you need to go up 500 feet. The way you do it is you don't put more angle of attack. You give more power, right? And so now it's interesting because the speed doesn't increase because your angle of attack, but your altitude does increase. So that's what they call reverse command. So anyway, the FAA wants you to know how to fly on the back side of the power curve, and we're going to practice that when we're out there flying. So it's pretty cool. All right. So anyway, we're going to talk about yaw, right? This is one of Logan's favorite thing, yaw, right? So why is yaw created, right? Because it's created from torque. It's pretty straightforward stuff. The torque of the propeller, right? For every action and equal opposite reaction, right? So you've got this thing turning like this, and so it's gonna pull. You're not just going to go straight forward, right? You've got the thrust coming backwards, but it also is pulling you towards the direction of the torque, right? And then you've got the slipstream. Now the slipstream is pretty interesting, right? So that's over here. You get the air coming off of it, and you can't really see it, but basically it comes up over the wing, under. So you've got this airflow that's twisting, right? Goes up over the airplane, under the airplane, and then hits the opposite side of the rudder. So now it pushes the yaw, it yaws it to the left. And where I remember yaw, it's all about the nose, right? And the way you can remember that is yaw got a booger in your nose. Yaw got a booger in your nose. So it moves the nose to the left, right? And then you've got the P factor, which is it's a downward movement of the propeller. So you've got the torque, which is just all the way going around, but then you also got to remember that as it goes down, it catches more air. So the P factor is as it goes down, it catches more air, and so it's more effective, right? But it's turning to the right. So so it's going to push it left again. So you've just got these tendencies, these yaw factors are going to push it to the left. And then you've got precession, which has to do with it's like a top, right? So you're up there and you've got the spinning propeller, right? Imagine it being a top, and basically what happens is it kind of comes in at a 90-degree angle, right? So it creates this force, and then it pops it left at a 90-degree angle, and it really is a big factor with tail wheels, right? Because you're cruising along, you're stable with 3 wheels, and as soon as that wheel lifts off, so I was talking to a tail wheel pilot, that precession comes in, and it's crazy. It'll just really pop that tail left. So anyway, yeah, it's something these guys got to be careful about. So anyway, we talked a little bit about wingtip vortices, how do you avoid them. I won't, we'll skip that as far as what to avoid. We just want to know about principles of flight. So ground effect, which is where the vortices come into play. So ground effects is fascinating, right? So you've got these wings that are, you've got this air that's just flowing around. Well, now you get down close to the ground, and the vertical component of the airflow around the wing is restricted, right? Because you're close to the ground, right? So it reduces the wingtip vortices. You don't have as much wingtip vortices, so now the plane's going to fly better. And air is trapped between the wing and the landing surface. So it creates this kind of really neat way you can float. That's why airplanes float close to the runway. So it can really help you if you're coming in short, and you just got to prepare for it. You just got to know that when you get there, you're not just going to land right on the ground. You got an aiming point is going to be before you land because of ground effect. So anyway, it also has a pretty cool effect on taking off. That's how you do a soft field landing, right? You can just take off, get off the soft field, so you're not getting stuck in the mud, and then you just fly in ground effect very efficiently until you get to the proper airspeed that you want to take off, and then you take off with the ground effect. So it's a pretty cool factor of flight that we use to our advantage, and more importantly sometimes, and then more importantly, we need to understand it when we're landing. So you have less induced drag close to the ground because of ground effects. So anyway, let's talk about climbing, right? Forces in a climb. Okay, let's talk about this for a second. When an aircraft begins climbing or descending, it's necessary for the ratio of those forces to be temporarily altered, right? So altered from straight and level flight, right? And climbing requires an increase in thrust. Obviously, you got to give more power, offset the increase in drag associated with the increased angle of attack. As the aircraft inclines upward, a portion of the weight force acts in the same direction as drag. 4 things that are going to affect your climb, right? It's pretty straightforward, but it's going to be weight. The greater the weight, the less of the rate of climb and the potential landing flaps. Flaps increase the lift, but also increase drag. So any increase in drag will reduce the rate and angle of climb. That's why you use flaps to take off, right? And then immediately you want to get them up when you do the climb. So that's obviously with everything in flying, there's good and bad to everything, right? And then power, the more power and engine capacity available, the better the climb performance. That's pretty straightforward. With the fighter jets, they're going almost straight up, right? It's just it's incredible. And then the wind can affect the angle of attack, certainly with the distance over the ground, right? So if you've got a headwind, you're gonna climb at a relative to the ground, you're gonna climb at a much faster rate, right? And then if you got a tailwind, you're gonna, as far as ground speed, you're gonna climb at a slower rate. So the wind plays a big factor there. All right, so we're gonna talk. We talk about angle of attack. You've got we're going to talk about stalls, when an airplane stalls. So most airplanes will stall right at 20 degrees, right? But it can also stall. The big thing to remember, it can occur at any pitch or attitude or airspeed. A stall means the wing is no longer able to produce enough lift to generate flight. It is still producing lift, just not enough to produce level flight, right? So as an airfoil increases its angle of attack, the coefficient of lift is increased, resulting in a greater lift being produced. The point at which the reduction in lift occurs as a result of reduction of smooth airflow over the wing is called the critical angle of attack. So the critical angle of attack is right before it's going to stall, right? So as soon as that airflow that's coming over the wing is separated, you stop. You don't have any lift. Like the whole flying thing's over. You're basically like a car in the sky. So what happens is you're not flying anymore. So now that they design it, that's why your weight and balance is so important. The nose comes down, and then you get your airspeed back and you get that proper angle of attack back, right? So exceeding the angle of attack is what causes an airfoil to stall. And always remember, it'll always stall at the same angle of attack. But so weight doesn't matter, but it does matter, and we'll talk about that later. But the only reason why it matters is because you have to have a higher angle of attack to climb as heavier you are. So anyway, another thing to keep in mind is wings are designed to stall at the root, right? They're designed to stall at the root, which means close to the airplane. So, all right. I want to talk a little bit about bank angle. When you increase your bank angle, you increase your load factor. Load and weight increases the stall speed. So at a 60-degree bank, the stall speed is 42% higher in a 182 and in general, right? So you just you got to be super careful, right? You're flying along at a normal speed, and then all of a sudden you just decide you want to bank real quick, turn real sharp, right? Well, the problem with that is that you're not, it's straight and level flight, you're not going to stall at that speed, but all of a sudden you turn and you're going to stall, right? And you're not ready for it, and bad things can happen. So I got a story I'll tell about that when I'm doing it. But so flaps are interesting. Flaps increase lift without increasing the angle of attack, right? Because it increases the the length of the wing, right? So it increases the lift without increasing the angle of attack. So you get more lift. That's why flaps are pretty cool. But it also increases drag. But anyway, so you want to have a center of gravity. A stable aircraft is just in front of the center of lift, right? So that's a stable aircraft. The center of lift is just aft of the CG, the center of gravity, right? So basically it's just behind the center of gravity, which makes sense. So the nose will fall forward during a stall, which I've mentioned a couple times. Anyway, yeah, pretty good stuff. You don't want to get heavy. But you know what's interesting about about lift is that weight does not affect the angle of attack. I mentioned this before, but lift must equal weight, right? So if you're heavy, you've got to have greater lift, and when you get greater lift, you have to put the nose up more. So you're going to go slower, you're going to put the nose up more, and so you have more of a chance to stall. So stalls will occur at low speed, high speed, turning. These are the times to be aware of your airspeed and attitude. A wing can be brought into the critical angle of attack at any airspeed. Anyway, talk about how far you want to go with this, but basically I got some stuff on here on how to get rid of, if you get yourself into a spin, what to do with the spin, and then the center of gravity. I'll just end it with this, but the center of gravity is super important, right? So you really got to memorize this, right? You really got to understand, not memorize, you really got to understand why it happens. Because you're going to be loading that airplane, and you need to know what you're doing, because it's not common sense. I mean, it is once you understand it, but if you don't understand it, you'll think something different than what it really is. So as the CG moves forward, the center of gravity moves forward, right? What happens is stall speed increases. So this is bad, right? So you're going to stall at a higher speed, right? As opposed to 72 knots, you're going to stall at 80 knots. So this is bad, right? The nose points down, right? So it goes down, and you might think, well, that's pretty cool, but yeah, it's all right. But you've got a slower airplane, right? Because it's inefficient, because you've got the tail. It's creating more drag. It's actually designed to have the nose up. And then you've got a higher stall speed, and then the biggest one is when you come into landing, right? You can fly the airplane, you're doing great, and then, obviously the problems are landing, right? The ground is not good. So you come into land and you can't flare, right? Because you're too heavy. You can't pull the nose up. So that's not good either. But what's really bad is when we're going to talk about CG being aft, being in the back, right? So now the stall speed decreases, right? So that's pretty cool. It goes from 72 to 65 knots on a 172. You have less tail drag, which is good, right? And then you got faster speeds, which is good. In fact, some pilots will load up the back of the airplane and give themselves an aft CG in order to make, to have a faster airplane, which is not very smart, because here's what happens. When you come to land, if you get into a stall, right, it's very difficult. A lot of people die because they've got aft CG and they can't recover from a stall. It makes it much more difficult, right? It's kind of like a tail stall. So that's how you want to think about that. We've got power and climb. We've got thrust offsets weight, so not necessarily increase angle of attack. So if you got a super powerful airplane, you don't have to have a great angle of attack. The more powerful it is. So as you climb, airspeed indicator no longer tells you true airspeed. We get into airspeed. I guess you don't know about that, but airspeed's next. But those are the principles of flight, and why an airplane flies. And hopefully, you thought I did a good job. All right, man. Thanks for watching.